Well, here we are at Dead Space 3. Seems like only yesterday I did a review for Dead Space 2. And not a single care was given that day. Well, I digress. I haven't learned my lesson. Here's my review of Dead Space 3. But before we get started, I want to thank everybody for their interactions on Devil May Cry's review, the one I did last month. It's been so great to see it get so popular, in our eyes at least. What did you think about it, Isaac?
Isaac! Hey! Hey! What?
Well, the man speaks the truth. Here's Dead Space 3, only on the Brotherhood of Gaming. It's been a while since I stepped foot into the Dead Space story, that I almost kind of forgot what happened previously. Sure, I can recall the generic stuff, but as far as plot, what was happening? Fortunately, there is enough recap to keep you in tune with what's going on without giving too much away. You do carry on the story of Isaac Clarke, not long after the events of Dead Space 2. However, he tries to move on with his life, but unfortunately, because of the outside world's problems, Isaac is forced back into danger's face, plasma cutter in hand, to put an end to the markers and their damage once and for all. The conflict, however, is not just between humans and necromorphs, but also elites that want to use the marker for their own gain, whatever it may be, from religious beliefs to what your imagination may tell you. I find that the story from Visceral Games and EA never ceased to keep my interest. For any outsider, it's naturally recommended that if you were going to get into this game, you probably would want to play the previous ones to have some sort of comprehension as to what's going on prior. Flashbacks and recaps are fine, and they tell you what you need to know, but you would be missing out to some degree. Let's talk about the development. Dead Space 3 this time has a built-in co-op campaign story where two players can join together through the web and work together. Sadly, as far as I've experimented, this can only be done through a network, and not locally. If there was a way, I unfortunately couldn't find it. I do have information how the two players would work, and for the first time it seemed questionable how it could. While single player in the campaign, clearly there is nobody traveling with you. However, while brief, there are moments during the game where sudden cutscenes can happen, and this character, Carlos, would seem to randomly be there, or be put in situations where you could question if he's supposed to be traveling with you. Even more interesting, there are areas in the game where multiple environmental puzzles and user interfaces can be accessed by two people. So without a doubt, you can definitely tell this was built to be a duo adventure. Amazingly, even by itself it perfectly works without a hitch. If a second player was involved, they would take control of Carlos, and some of the game's story and world would be influenced and changed by it. Certain dialogues and scenes may play out differently, some story elements could be revealed differently, and some trials of helping each other out through different obstacles would happen. Both players naturally share gameplay mechanics, with probably some small key featured character differences, which is already a huge means for replay value. This is as much as I can say about the online based on what I've seen and read. But how about the game by itself? Without beating around the bush, I'll tell you flat out and then explain. Dead Space 3 on your first run is going to be very long and very challenging. For your buck, you do get a fairly lengthy game with a lot of awe-inspiring visuals that beg for exploration, regardless if you want to or not. So much of the game's overworld has so much to look at that you may take it slow just to make sure that you don't miss anything. An interesting note is that most of it is not just for show. You can explore this system. The vast reaches of space, the ground, the corridors, so much of it is open for you to explore and find hidden items and treasures. It's just up to you to make those kinds of decisions.
Since when are you giving the order?
The world layout is pretty huge, and there is copious amounts of backtracking and exploration with some puzzle solving to be had. Getting these out of the way, the puzzles are not infantile. They don't undermine the player's intelligence to figure things out, but they also don't demand you need to know quantum physics in order to solve them. With enough patience and observation, you can figure it out and make your way through them. Just don't be dismayed by their complicated look. Your inventory system this time around is not so different than what you're used to, or should have been used to, but even it has undergone a transformation for the better. You now have 5 options at the customization bench. Create a new weapon from items you have found scattered through the game. Analyze your blueprints of items. Upgrade a weapon with power nodes you find. Use in-game currency to purchase ammunition or health upgrades as well as other items, or you can sell them. Or 5. Your safe, where you can store any overstocked items you have in your inventory. These benches are all over the place, so you never need to travel too far if you're in a bind for some upgrading. Speaking of upgrading, your outfit and helmet, aka the rig, also has its own upgrading system, usually found nearby the benches, but likely not so early on. Through the story, Isaac will unlock new outfits he can wear, which is necessary because without spoiling, let's just say some of these outfits can be less effective in the wrong environment. You'll see what I mean. Using the same nodes you find to upgrade your weapons can also be used here to do the same with your life bar, your stasis energy, and your oxygen when you're wandering the reaches of space. When it comes to gathering items, fortunately a new little item was made to help you do just that.
Huh. Wow. An old scavenger bot. This'll come in handy.
By setting these little guys down in certain environments, they will locate and find random stuff, and make their way back to the bench for you to check out. It's usually always a good idea to set them down as soon as you get them, but that's for you to decide. As for weaponry, you do have a lot of customizable parts and weapons you can forge, granted you find the right items to do so. Some familiar ones to some new ones. Your plasma cutter of course is standard, and if you're good enough, upgrading this little baby will be all the firepower you need. It was definitely my main weapon of choice next to the pulse rifle, which you too will undoubtedly get in the story, but it's up to you to figure out what kind of weapons you will be most comfortable using. There are others like the line gun and machine gun of sorts, and the ripper saw. I didn't make all of the weapons, nor did I feel really compelled to, since once you find something you're good with, trying something new almost seems too risky, and you know the saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But just in case you do, you will also find that all of the upgradable nodes you have acquired and put on your weapons can also be removed and put on others. Some of the nodes also carry abilities such as more damage, more firepower, you get the idea. So just in case you want to try switching up your arsenal, you do have a lot of options, and you don't need to feel stuck carrying a weapon you don't want just because you fear you lost your nodes upgrading it. Now unless you're playing this game on harder difficulties, which I wouldn't recommend for your first run. Having said that, I'm sure a lot of you probably will. On the normal difficulty, ammunition and health drops are plentiful, for good reason. A surprise twist is that even on the normal difficulty setting, this game will get very relentless and throw everything it has at you. Old enemies, new enemies, human enemies with guns, they come by the party and are out for blood. Getting down to the meat of things, this whole game is trial and error. There will be so many fatal obstacles in your path that you didn't see coming, or maybe you would have, but couldn't react. So most of the time you will be trying to find the best way to progress beyond certain events. Fortunately, there are no lives or continues, and you instantly reload back to the nearest checkpoint, so there is no real consequence for making these mistakes. Consequence or not, you will definitely feel some rage begin to build when you find that you have hit a brick wall and are desperately trying to survive to continue. Being the third installment into a world we should be familiar with, Dead Space 3 offers no mercy. It starts out easy enough and progressively gets harder like a video game should, so it definitely is challenging, but it's the good kind of challenging that makes you want to try again and overcome your problem. Now when I mention that ammunition and health come plentiful on normal, you're probably asking, how could that be so rough? Well, it's simple. The enemies have learned to take abuse. Going for their limbs is still a good strategy. Me, I personally love to go for their legs to get them off of their feet. However, even that doesn't do much anymore. These monsters will crawl, and they will do it fast. It's clear what they want, and that is to see you dead. The necromorphs I already mentioned, you will see some of the old ones and some of the new, but one in particular I want to mention is what makes this not so survival horror game into more of a slasher horror. This is one enemy spoiler, so don't worry about it. There is this monster that, unlike all of the other ones, is impossible to kill. It chases you around the entire game, scripted to show up at major inconvenient times to make your nervous wreck level travel pretty high simply because there is not a thing you can do about it. You can shoot it, cut off its limbs, to no avail. Within about 30 seconds, it will grow new ones and be after you again. He's no fun. Lastly, your melee attacks overall still are the same and just about as effective. However, with the enemies getting stronger, it's almost suicidal to go up and brutally assault almost anything until you are absolutely certain they can't fight you back. Even heavily wounded and on the ground, the necromorphs are still very agile and able to kill without any fault. So be sure to only use these melee attacks if you really need to. Otherwise, you're in for a lot of trouble. Once all enemies are dead, it's a great idea to go and stomp their corpses. HP items, ammunition, and other items will always pop out, so make sure that you do this. As for the visual look and the music behind everything, it's very nice with a lot of huge things to look at. The settings are wide and huge, and I mentioned before how it's wonderful to have an open world that is immense and great for looking at, but you can also explore it. You have that entire freedom of Dead Space 3. It definitely shows a lot of care was put into the project. The music is moody and is there to fit the scenes and what's going on. The whole feeling kind of feels like a crossover between Aliens and The Thing. And while it might not be for everybody, I would go as far to say you might want to check this one out. I enjoyed this one enough to want to play it a couple of times more. It offers a New Game Plus, which allows you to play the game again with some benefits, like keeping your arsenal from the last playthrough and unlocking some bonus content. Dead Space has been one heck of a series with all of its movies, side games, comics, and main story arc, and it's fun to see how this one moves things forward. Is this the final chapter for Isaac Clarke and the Markers? It's your choice. I've shared with you my opinion and impressions upon this title, so is it worth your money? Hopefully, this review has given you some insight on what to expect. I'm William Morris of the Brotherhood of Gaming.com, and until next time, viewers, keep on gaming.
Dead Space 3, rated M for mature.